Hi, I'm Mike. Welcome to my Waffle Square, where I obsess about things and you get to benefit from it. Now, episode 1 of our refurbishing of this Land Rover LR3 is literally uploading in the house right now, and we're already out here in the garage working on our second video, which is going to be diagnosing the pretty significant coolant leak that we have in the engine. So let's get started. Now here's the items I find to be helpful or essential to complete this task. I like having some snack bags or sandwich bags and a Sharpie so I can separate all of the various screws. For example, the fan shroud and the air filter screws. A cordless drill with an extension for the Phillips to get the air filter off. A small flathead. You're going to need 9/32, 5/16, 8mm, 10mm, and 1/2 inch sockets. A strap wrench, fan removal tools, Loctite, a breaker bar with a 1/2 inch and 3/8 inch head, a torque wrench that goes down to 7 foot-pounds, panel removal tool and or a flathead screwdriver, toothbrush, brake cleaner, 5-in-1 tool, razor blade, all helpful for cleaning up grime and scraping off old gasket sealer. You're going to need to purchase or rent a kit to pressure test the coolant system so you can find the leak. New serpentine belts, some sort of radiator flush, distilled water, and the proper replacement coolant. So in our circumstance, we know that our leak is on the front of the engine. There are some circumstances where you could have head gasket leaks or things in the back, like going to the heater core. Ours seems to be concentrated up front so far. So I want to get as much access, visual access to this area right down underneath the fan shroud. So I'm going to be removing the fan shroud, then the fan underneath it, because in addition to checking for leaks, we are also going to be changing out the serpentine belts. I can't find any specific listing in the Carfax report of that ever being done for this vehicle. It's got 189,000 miles on it or so, and they recommend doing that at about 115,000. So we're going to take care of that while we're already rooting around in here. And if it turns out to be the water pump, then that'll be perfect because we will have need to taken those off anyway. All right, before I take the shroud and the fan blade off, let's get some more access by removing the box for the air filter and then the intake heading all the way up to the throttle body. So the first thing we're going to do is take this 9/32 and loosen this clamp. And then I want to pull out the plug for the mass airflow sensor. Now you can push down right here, but I have found it's a little easier and less likely to break it if you pry it up from the back and then slide it right off, just like that. And then we're going to need to remove the, what is it, 6 screws from the air box. Now I've got my awesome little grip mat right over here. That was a Father's Day gift, and I just love it. Now, several of these are deep down in there, so I recommend an extension. Okay, I want to remove this breather tube right here. You squeeze on either side of it, and it comes off of the intake pipe here. Now let's just pry this guy back. There we go. Now we can get this guy out of our way. All right, our fan shroud has 2 Phillips screws and then some clips that I'll show you in just a second. So let's get those Phillips screws first. All right, here's a picture of the metal tabs that the plastic fan shroud pop into. What you have to do is squeeze, like you see here, to release them out of those tabs. There's one right there, and then 1, 2 on this side. There we go. Just got to get it right around this coolant hose. And there we are. Next comes removing the fan blade. Now, for that, there are some tools made specifically for removing the fans. I bought this one off of Amazon. I'll leave a link. There are some questions as to whether or not this was strong enough. That might be an issue if you have some rust. Say you live in the Pacific Northwest or you live in a wet, snowy area where there's salt on the road. This vehicle has basically never left Las Vegas, which is a very dry climate. And ours is going to come off really easy. But if you look right down here where my hand is, you will see the nut that is 36 millimeter. Now we need to turn that clockwise. Usually lefty-loosey, righty-tighty. It's the opposite for the fan because of the way it spins. This portion of the tool rests on the two nuts that are holding the fan clutch into place. And what that's going to do is hold the fan clutch in place, so as you're wrenching on this 36 millimeter nut holding the fan blade on, it doesn't just simply spin the fan clutch. Now, holding that in place, we come down here with our 36 millimeter wrench. This kit comes with a 32 and a 36 because vehicles are different. And then we're starting to break away. Now that is a lot easier than I've seen it in several videos, so it leads me to believe that lots of people are in wetter climates than we have here. We're pretty fortunate. Now if you're having that issue, you might want to spray some PB Blaster or something ahead of time so that yours comes off easy. And then I saw this little trick. See how I'm just spinning it and the nut is spinning on its own? Now before we come off all the way, now that we have the fan shroud out and we have access to it, we want to pull the plug for the fan, which is right here. To do that, I'm going to get right in there with my screwdriver, pry back that clip again, and just pull it right out. See that? Now we can free the electrical cord for the fan. Yeah. There it goes. Now this gives us a pretty good view, especially when you consider the water pump is right up here up top. But I want to have all the belts out of the way so when we start to pressurize, I can tell if it's just coming out of the water pump or somewhere down below. And to do that, we're going to be wrenching around here in a bit. So I'm going to put a piece of cardboard down here to protect the radiator. And to hold it in place, I got just a couple things of duct tape just to hold it in the corners. All right. First thing to do is release the tension off the first serpentine belt. There's actually two in here. And to do that, we're going to need a 1/2 inch drive to crank this pulley against its spring tension in so that we can remove the first serpentine belt. So I have a nice 1/2 inch straight bar, and it goes right into this little square here, just like that. Perfect. And then you need to overcome that spring tension by pulling it this way. And then we can get the first serpentine belt off, and there we go. Now, instead of messing with it and trying to pull it past everything, we're going to be removing this pulley anyway, which is necessary to get to the other serpentine belt. So I'm just going to leave it right here, and we're going to take one 1/2 inch bolt off of that. But while I got it here, let's look and see what shape this guy's in. And boy, I don't see any cracking on the inside at all. I feel good about changing it out, but it wasn't about to bust, so somebody's been loving on this car. All right. I'm going to put a 1/2 inch on this breaker bar just to get it loose, and then I got a smaller ratchet to make quicker time of it. Now this time it is lefty-loosey. Good. Now you can see that cardboard's already paid for itself. Dang. All right. Out comes the pulley and the belt. The way to check this pulley to see if it's good, we already tested the spring tension and it was fine, but you want to grab onto the pulley wheel itself and feel if there's any play, and I don't feel anything, so it doesn't make any noise when the engine's running, so I think this one is good to go. Now that first serpentine was super easy. It basically just went around the outside of 3 components. The second one inside is way more complex. So I'm going to take some time to document where everything loops and dives and climbs and crawls around that whole system before I just release the tension over on this pulley and take it off. All right, let's start at the alternator. It's the easiest starting point. So going up the top belt, it comes all the way up to the water pump, over the top of the water pump, goes all the way down to over there to the air conditioner, around the outside of that one, and down to the power steering. It goes around the outside of the power steering and then comes up and around the main crankshaft, and at this point it inverts. See that? To this tensioner pulley, and now it's kind of inside out as it comes all the way down past this idler pulley and back down to the bottom of the alternator. All right, now that we got the tensioner and the first serpentine belt out of the way, let's take off this fan clutch, because we're going to need to take the bracket that it's attached to off to be able to remove the second belt. And to do that, we're going to switch over to the metric system for the first time today and use a 10 millimeter. That just comes right off. All right, now this little guy here swings and is notched out so you can get to all the 5/16 nuts. And then up top, there is a bracket that has 3 bolts in it, 2 of which are the 5/16, but this one right here in the center is a 10 millimeter. Let's get that one first. It holds a bracket that holds this hose assembly on. All right, with all those bolts removed, this bracket comes out. So these are slightly different than the 2 up top, so I would leave them in there just like that. That way you don't lose them and you don't need them to come out all the way anyway. Now as we look at this guy, I'm going to inspect the bearing. I don't feel any play in it, so I think this is in good shape. All right, so I got our breaker bar, and now I'm going to release the tension and remove the belt, and I think I can reach down there and get the belt off of the alternator, and I think that'll be our best bet. So I'm going to push to get past all the tension, reach down, and get the belt right around the alternator. That was easy. Okay, ease back that tensioner pulley, and let's unwind this serpentine belt now that we've tracked it. All right, before we inspect this inner belt, I want to reach in here for this tensioner pulley and do the same test. And it doesn't have any play, and when we spin it, there's no sound of any bearings noise, so we're good with that one too. That's great. All right, now it's real easy, as we demonstrated here, to remove the outer serpentine belt. I wonder if they took the extra time like we just did to get to this one. And I'd have to say that looks just fine as well. So I want to remove the pulley right off the front of the water pump so I can get a good look to see in there if that's where the leak is coming from. But when I put the 5/16 ratchet on there, it just spins freely, as you can see here. So to stop it, I'm going to take this strap wrench I have and mimic the serpentine belt and hold it still so I can get those 3 bolts off of there. Yeah, there we go. And there that comes. Next thing I want to do is organize all the bolts so nothing gets commingled. And then I'm going to get down here with the camera and take a really good look at everything we can see, where the biggest collections of fluid are. Then I'm going to clean everything off in preparation for our pressure test so that we know as soon as possible right where the leak is coming from. All right, I got some brake cleaner and I got a little light to guide me around. I wish I could use the straw, but there's not enough gap here, so I'm just going to be careful and spray off everything I can. All right, I'm going to wipe all that off. Oh, before we even get to the pressure test, look at the freeze plug on the bottom of the water pump. There's like a piece chipped out on top and it's just open. You can see the green coolant just sitting there ready to come out of it. Now here is the replacement pump. And when you look on top of that freeze plug area, you can see it's open as well. So if we look at the top of the water pump, there is a hole there. And that hole and this hole by this freeze plug are connected. So you can blow through that one and the air comes out here. So for water to be leaking out of that area, the seal behind this impeller must be bad on the existing water pump. So this thing of beauty is our brand new Oymeri 28-piece radiator pressure tester. And it's got all these various caps for overflow tanks, or if you actually still have a radiator cap on your radiator, you can put these on. And then you take this unit here with its own gauge and you pump up the system to whatever is rated on the radiator cap, in our case 16 psi. And then you go rooting around throughout the engine and the coolant lines and see if you can find where the leak is. This one also has a vacuum system. So when you fixed the leak, you can test with vacuum instead of pressure. And then once it's holding the proper amount of vacuum, then you can attach a line that goes right into your new coolant, or in our case, it's going to go into distilled water and radiator flush, and it'll draw it into the system and should take out almost all of the bubbles. So pretty awesome. There are tons of these on Amazon. The reason I picked this one is in the posting, it had 2 different listings for Land Rover, which I couldn't find in any of the other ones. So if you look at the instructions right here, they have a great gauge. Here's a close-up picture where it lists out what each of these various caps go to. And 12 and 22 are rated as going for Land Rover. Number 12 here is the bigger of the 2, and it's the one for our LR3. So let's move over to the overflow tank and let's hook it up. So we know we have a leak right there at the water pump. The question is, how big is that leak, and could it really be responsible for all of the dripping we're seeing at the bottom of the engine? I've got a little action cam set up down here, pointed right at that freeze plug area. So let's take the cap off. We'll put on a pressure tester cap, connect on the quick release here, and then I'm going to pump it up to no more than 16 psi, which is what's rated on the cap. We might not even get there. So I'm not getting a good seal right here at this cap. So after some trial and error with other caps, I finally figured out it was number 6. that is marked Ford and Land Rover, and that one seems to be holding pressure really well. I don't hear any leaking coming out of here finally. All right, so we've confirmed that the water pump is leaking. What I can't necessarily confirm is there's nothing below that, but since the water pump is obviously the highest leak, I say we drain the coolant and change out the water pump. So I'm gonna release the pressure with this little tab right here. So next, let's get underneath the car and I'll show you where to drain the radiator plug. All right, we're looking at the front of the vehicle on the passenger side. Here's the passenger tire. And to gain access to the drain plug for the radiator, we need to pull out this little side skirt. And it is held in place by 4 of these little plastic push pins. I have found the best way when those are inserted tight like that is to have a panel removal tool. You get in, pull the center part out to like that, and then you can get in with this panel removal tool and pop the whole thing out, and then it's reusable. And once you remove that passenger side panel, you get a direct look right here at the bottom right corner of the radiator, and that little screw right there is our drain plug. So I'm going to put a bucket under it, we're going to unscrew it, and off we go. Okay, I Googled it, and there's supposed to be a full coolant system on the Land Rover LR3 should be 9.5 liters, which is like 2.5 gallons. This is like a 2-gallon, just under 9.5 liters, so I have this extra plastic bin here to catch whatever might spill over it. But I want to have this guy to start catching it if it really starts pouring out, you know, just like we did with the oil. All right, I got safety glasses on because I don't want to get it splashed in my eye. Took my watch off. Let's pull this little drain plug out. Oh, pretty easy. All right. And that is slow rolling out of there. So next thing I'm going to do is head up top and I'll show you what's next. And now that that's draining down there, we can open up this little plug right here on the coolant bottle. Well, even with the top plug out, it's draining really slow. I wonder what would happen if I put some pressure on the unit. Let's find out. Yeah, that helps, right? So we've got 7 bolts, but only 5 to remove. Here's how you differentiate. Well, 2 bolts come installed on the water pump to hold it together, so we can use the new one as a gauge to find out which 5 we need to remove from the car. So for reference, I'm going to set this water pump right here so I can see exactly which screws to remove and which ones to leave alone. Eight millimeter. There's one all the way out. Definitely using blue Loctite. That's good. And that's our 5th one all the way out. Let's see if we can just pull this thing off or if we're gonna have to pry it. Oh, that came right off. There's plenty of fluid coming out of there too. All right, well, that's dripping. Let's see if we can push any more out. Yeah, look at that. Just by adding a little bit of pressure. Awesome. All right. I see a bunch of gasket sealer all around that we're going to want to scrape off. I think the first thing I'm going to do is get in here with some brake cleaner and really squirt out all of that disgustingness. Blah. I'm going to get in here with an old toothbrush and really clean out all this grime, because there's a bunch of kind of oily, grimy stop leak residue where this bottom screw is going to go, and I don't want to leak. Getting in here with a 5-in-1 tools, just scraping all that off. Well, all that grime there in the grooves of the top of the crankshaft pulley wasn't there when I pulled the water pump off, so all of that must have come out of the coolant system. Nasty. Well, the port on the left, as I stand in front of it, still looks like it's got some coolant in there. It's slightly dripping towards where we're going to be putting new gaskets. Let's see if I can pull anything out of there. Oh yeah. Plenty. Got about another whole liter by sucking out those two ports. Well, it looks like everything about these two water pumps, including the kind of plastic looking impeller inside, are exactly the same. So I read the instructions on this new water pump, and it stated that you should use a gasket sealer. So before I put that on, I took the time to rub everything down on the engine block as well as the gasket and new water pump with isopropyl alcohol, which might be overkill since I use brake cleaner, but what the heck. All right, everything got cleaned off with brake cleaner. Then I took a 5-in-1 tool and did the initial scraping all around where the old gasket used to be. Followed that up with a razor blade to really fine tune it. And we are ready to go. You can see in this picture here just how nice and clean that looks. And I got all the RTV sealant on there. This is specifically made for water pumps and thermostats, so I've got a layer of it on both sides of the included gasket. Let's get it in there and start getting some screws in place. I took the time to put Loctite on these bolts ahead of time so they're ready to go. And I'm just going to get them all in there hand tight, and I'm going to switch over to my torque wrench. All right, I've got my smallest torque wrench, and it is neck down to 1/4 inch to accommodate this little 8mm socket, and it's set to 7 foot-pounds. There we go, there's one. I'm going to do these in a crisscross pattern. 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm going to let that sit for 24 hours at least before I do another pressure test and then fill it up. Now before we test the system, I noticed right up here on top of the engine that the air bleed valve is missing. It's just been bypassed with some sort of straight tube. And I'm gonna wanna use that when we're bleeding air out of the coolant system. So I got this OEM part. And as you can see right there, it has the air bleeder valve up top. Well, instead of using the pressure tester, this time we're going to use the vacuum tester because it has 2 functions. Number 1, it's going to test the system for leaks. And number 2, if we confirm that there's no leaks and it's holding vacuum, then we can hook a hose up right here that goes down into a bucket of coolant and water, or in our case, flush and water, and it will draw it back into the system. So this blue hose is hooked to our overflow bottle. Then this orange hose here is hooked to my air compressor. We're going to pop this valve right here over. It's going to blow air down, creating vacuum. If we can get to this 20 to 25 range, that's optimum. Then we will shut this guy off, and then we're going to hold it and see how long we get a good reading. So here we go. Going quick. Look at this main coolant hose. It is pinched and sucked completely together. Same with this little guy right here. After only 25 minutes, we're down to 7 in vacuum pressure, so I don't hear any hissing coming from the coolant bottle or the cap that we screw on for this system. Maybe it's something with the thermostat, and we're still regulating out vacuum. Anyway, nonetheless, I'm going to recharge the system and see if it will steady itself. All right, it's not holding vacuum, so I don't know if it's the cap or if we have a leak somewhere else in the system, but there's only one way to find out. So let's bring the water back in with the vacuum. I have already charged this line. Basically, I brought the water up to right about here and clicked it into place. That way we're not introducing a lot of air from the bucket down below. So let's get the vacuum back up where it belongs and we'll get started drawing the water in. I'm curious to see what it's gonna look like. All right, that's it. Now let's suck the water in. It's doing a good job. I need to add some more water though. All right, I don't see any more being drawn up, so I think we're ready to shut everything down. You can see here it did a pretty good job. There's the water and flush line right there. Now before I put everything back together to start the engine and run that flush all the way through, I'm going to do another leak test over here by pressurizing the system. Well, even with thread tape, I can't get the cap to hold pressure. It keeps leaking out of it. But what little pressure I am putting in there, about 5 to 10 pounds before it starts to leak out, hasn't resulted in any leaking up here or down below that I can see. So let's put it all back together in reverse order and run the engine. All right, everything's buttoned back up. Let's start her up. Got the temperature turned all the way up so we can engage the heater core. Well, we've been idling about 20 minutes and it's keeping normal operating temperature. That's a good sign that we probably don't have any air bubbles. So I think we'll turn it off, let it cool down while we check for leaks, drain it, and then refill it with proper coolant. About the most we're getting is over here at the coolant bottle at about 181 degrees. 150, 55 there. Well, this was always the spot for the telltale signs of leaks, and I don't see anything. It's bone dry down here. Now, optimally, while flushing the system, you would want to be actually driving the car for at least 10 minutes with the heater on. But because I need to service the transmission and fix the air suspension, I didn't feel comfortable doing that. So just running it idle would have to do for us for now. So once I drained the system, I did refill it with this Peak antifreeze for European vehicles. And I chose this one because it specifically says on the front, made for Land Rover Freelander, Discovery, Defender, 1998 and up. And I would also recommend that you buy the concentrate rather than the pre-mixed, because one bottle of concentrate and 1 or 2 bottles of distilled water is going to be a lot less than 2 bottles of the premix. Now, if you found this video helpful, will you please give it a thumbs up? It really helps the algorithms to start suggesting it to more viewers like you. Also, please consider subscribing. There's a lot more work to be done on this vehicle, and there's many more videos to come. Now, I'm going to leave links for everything that we use in this video, including the exact water pump and serpentine belts. Now, full disclosure, all of those are going to be Amazon affiliate links. So if you click on them and end up making a purchase, it won't cost you a thing, but I do get a small reward at the end of the month. It helps to justify all the extra time it takes to make these videos while working on cars. Now, I'd love it if you leave a comment or question below. I respond to all comments and questions. Let's take a look at a few from the last video. Josh writes, cool video. I'm in Northwest Las Vegas. My wife bought an 07 LR3 V8 about 2 years ago. I've been doing all the work to it. I have learned quite a bit. I also have a LR number for spare parts. Have any questions? Hit me up. All the best, Josh. Josh, thank you so much. I would have never known I had somebody right here in Las Vegas that I could reach out to if I get stuck. Now, FT was not quite so impressed. So you spend $25 for a junk look like your airbags on your suspension? You love the overpriced junk, not very smart. FT, thank you for your comment. May I suggest in the future, if you're going to criticize someone for being not very smart, you at least try to do a grammar and punctuation check? SoCal South Bay wrote, Mike, congrats on your purchase. Disco 3 are very reliable. The minute you finish all the catching via maintenance, it will be worth it. SoCal South Bay, I hopped over on your YouTube channel and let me just say, keep surfing, brother. And finally, check out James Ray, who left a complete rundown of all the things he did to his 2007 Land Rover. And I'm grateful for everyone who left a video and all of the viewers as well. Our next video is going to be working on that transmission because I have all the parts and the replacement fluids and filters. So until then, thank you for watching.